Well, welcome everybody. I'm Jarvis Todd, the publisher of Telemedia Magazine and the proprietor of Telemedia World Telemedia Events. And this is my old mate Paul Skeldon, who's the editor of all things Telemedia, the news, online.co.uk, the fantastic magazine, which is just out now, and also the Intrepid Explorer that has come back from the recent 8.1 live event in Barcelona. And this is our bi-monthly vodcast where we talk through some of the most interesting news items and bits of interesting content surrounding the world of telemedia. Hello, Paul. How are you, mate?
Hello, I'm good. I'm good. I like the way you're the proprietor, the
Well, I don't know.
telemedia pub, and we drink in the telemedia pub, of which you
Exactly.
are the amiable host and landlord. So
Exactly.
yes, it's
Exactly.
yes, it's good. Yes, it's good to know that.
Right. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to talk about over the next 30 odd minutes. And again, as Paul just mentioned, a lot of the most recent news came from our 8 Point Live event, which happened on the 25th and 26th of February, just overlapping and just before Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, where we brought together 500 to 600 of the leading telemedia players for a day and a half of high-level networking and a tabletop exhibition, during which time Paul managed to grab some face-to-face time with some of our sponsors, some of our exhibitors, and some of the people that Paul felt had a good story to tell. And if you saw the recent Telemedia News letter, you will have noticed that Paul did, in fact, put quite a lot of the video interviews up. And I have to say that, whilst it's great to read some of your in-depth articles, Paul, nothing it beats hearing it from the horse's mouth and hearing what people have got to say directly, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and it was interesting actually pulling together seemingly sort of disparate parts of the telemedia industry to talk about things. They did actually circle back to the same sorts of issues, actually, content
Yeah.
fatigue and the MENA market, and of course AI.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I would agree. I would agree with that. And I think for anyone that doesn't know, I mean, if you talk about the sort of telemedia being the umbrella under which we talk about value-added services, premium content, how customers are being marketed, how these services are being marketed, how customers are then paying for them, and what kind of services they want to pay for. So we're going to loosely, I think, follow, or no, it's very much follow those kinds of themes
hmm.
over the next 30 minutes. So we've got some interesting views on what happened from in the messaging world. We're going to talk about DCB billing fraud and compliance, and again, as you just rightly pointed out, how content is booming and how I think the telemedia industry is one of the places where the kind of premium services that are going to really help build the market are being incubated within our sector, which is obviously very good news. So those are the three areas we're going to cover. Let's start off with the first one. And we're also going to draw on some of Paul's experiences here because not only was 8.1 Live the main event in town, but there was a thing called Mobile World Congress going on. And there was also some interesting side shows run by the Mobile Ecosystem Forum as well. So the first story, I suppose, as such, is OTT business messaging traffic to reach 175 billion globally by 2025 as regulation reduces market silos. And this, I think, represents a growth of around about 70% in 2 years, which is off the chart, really. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about this, Paul. And as I say, I think this references Mobile Squared's presentation that
Well,
you
yes,
had.
this sort of hung this around a news story that's come out from Juniper Research this morning about how business messaging is growing. But I think it's sort of a nice hook, really, to hang some of the stuff about messaging that I picked up whilst at 8.1 Live and at Mobile World Congress. There was a very interesting event on the Sunday before Mobile World Congress actually kicked off, run by the Mobile Ecosystem Forum and Mobile Squared, looking at business messaging and where it's sort of heading. And this Juniper research report out today sort of is very sort of similar with what Nick Lane from Mobile Squared was saying, that the sort of potential for business messaging is nowhere near been exploited yet, and it is going to explode. Now, Juniper's view is that this is down to sort of the deregulation around, or the regulation rather, around things like WhatsApp. WhatsApp's being forced in Europe, particularly, to be interoperable. We saw as well at the end of last year how Apple are going to embrace RCS, which is another form of sort of rich business messaging. I think together these two things are going to drive now finally the sort of move away from just using SMS as a business messaging outreach thing into something much richer, which we're going to see across RCS and we're going to see across WhatsApp. What's interesting is that SMS is still growing considerably as a business messaging channel. However, it's dogged by increasing levels of artificial inflation of traffic, so sort of fraudulent sort of use of business messaging, particularly around one-time passcodes and stuff like that. And according to Mobile Square, this is going to sort of peak its growth sort of this year. It is then going to start to decline. Now, a lot of that decline is going to be, I mean, it's still going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's not sort of, being wiped out, but it is going to start to drop because a lot of that is going to move to WhatsApp business messaging and RCS. Because they're cleaner. In the case of WhatsApp, it has has a sort of strange business model. In fact, the business just pays for the one message, regardless of whether the consumer replies to it in a conversation. So they pay once, a minuscule amount, and get a whole conversation. I imagine that will probably change. So we're going to see more use of this richer business messaging. So I think expect to see messaging channels being used in new and more sort of creative ways, especially around actually directly selling stuff out of messages. I think that's now finally going to come to fruition. I think that's sort of largely where this was going. And a lot of what was talked about at this MEF event was that around how the potential for all kinds of messaging, including SMS, around marketing is nowhere near being exploited. If you look at how much sort of email marketing is done compared to how much SMS-based marketing is done, there's a huge disparity. So there's a vast amount of money potentially to be made in this. But, it's coming down the pipe and it's finally starting to happen. It's something we've talked about a lot. So that was one of the biggest messaging things that came out of my trip to Barcelona.
Well, good. And I would worth pointing out that if you have got hold of the latest copy of Telemedia magazine, which hit my desk this week, there's plenty of interesting messaging articles or features in there. One talks about RCS taking on OTT and SMS. And there's also an interesting Meet the People from Rafael Novak, who is the business messaging director at Horizon, who are one of the biggest messaging companies that I think have started to make a play for the telemedia market. And you'll see them sponsoring and exhibiting in Marbella again this year. Just from an anecdotal point of view, after I suppose 7 or 8 years now of having the same Android device and having the Mickey taken out of me mercilessly by my peers in the telemedia world, I can report that I have an up-to-date Samsung S24, which I proudly have right here. And I have to say, bizarrely, I was somewhat surprised to see that RCS was automatically part of what used to be my SMS icon. So firstly, I was surprised that I was surprised because I kind of didn't really understand, know how it was going to be sort of rolled out to users. Secondly, what was very interesting was that, I mean, it is seamless. I mean, whereas I used to click the SMS messaging icon, it's all in the same sort of place on my phone. But perhaps the most surprising thing is that of all of the customer services messages that I've received so far, not one of them has had any kind of RCS enhancement whatsoever.
No, it's quite rare currently, but it will come September once it's baked into the iOS update, which I think is the plan. I think you'll start to see in 2025 more companies starting to use it. I believe Asda uses it. If you have your groceries delivered by Asda and you have an RCS compatible phone, you'll get your shopping is coming message as an RCS
Okay.
message. But yeah, very few
Yeah.
people are actually using it. But
Which is remarkable, really, when you think about it. So I'm looking forward to reporting back when I receive my first
yeah,
genuinely, interactive RCS message, and I can't wait to show everybody what that was. But so we'll have to wait and see. Asda, unfortunately, is not an option for me in my part of the world.
no.
Anyway, so more on messaging over the course of the year, of course. Let's move on to some of the messaging that came out of Barcelona, and I know that Paul did a number of very interesting interviews, which are all linked from the recent telemedia news. A variety of leaders in our industry gave Paul an insight into where DCB was and where fraud and compliance was with relation to that. And it kind of, I think, comes under one big umbrella. It was very encouraging to hear everybody being very positive about, as we would hope, DCB being, such a perfect billing mechanism for value-added services on mobile phones. We are expecting and hoping that the telemedia industry will continue to make that market grow, and therefore DCB will continue to forge its way into the mainstream. Although I think it probably is part of the mainstream, but nevertheless, there was lots of optimism around the market. However, of course, that's always underpinned by fraud and compliance. Although I think in some of the interviews, it seemed as though we were talking about DCB being supported by very good fraud and compliance systems being put in place by the likes of Impello MCP and, of course, the mighty Evina. So we're just going to draw everyone's attention to a couple of those interviews that you did in Barcelona, Paul. The
Mm.
first one was, of course, the ever-present David Lofty, the CEO and founder of Evina, who was talking about DCB going from strength to strength. But one of the things that well, I mean, not surprisingly, really struck me about pretty much every conversation that I had and also interviews that you did was how now AI seems to be ever present in absolutely every aspect of the telemedia industry. And I suppose when it comes to fraud, not least because,
Mm.
of course, the fraudsters have been quick to jump on the possibilities that AI offer. But before you go into David, and I think also we spoke to Xenia from MCP about AI. What I thought was really interesting was that when the discussions around AI in the sort of mainstream and the news, in general, I think lots of people are really quite frightened
Mm.
and see a real kind of downside. Whereas it seemed to me that when you're talking about payments, content, anti-fraud, compliance within the sort of telemedia sector, the deployment of AI seems to be nothing but positive.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the thing is that sort of people were worrying about AI taking over the world. I think in many ways it already has. We just don't, it's behind the scenes of pretty much everything that we do. Across the sort of telemedia business, I mean, it sits everywhere from analyzing the data about what people do, which then leads to how you target content at the right parts of the market, to actually creating the content itself, to monitoring the content and the services and the users, battling the fraud, enhancing compliance. It's just everywhere. And I think rather than something that's going to sort of take over the world and sort of subjugate us in a sort of Terminator-esque kind of way, it's a tool. I mean, as a journalist, I use AI as a tool. It helps with research. You can ask it the questions. It just saves time. It is a tool. It's not a replacement. And I think with all of these things that we have in the telemedia sector, it only can enhance how these things operate. So we were talking about carrier billing. I mean, carrier billing is becoming mainstream, and sort of one of the other videos that we did talking to dynamic mobile billing, their view is it is a mainstream service. It's ideally suited to digital content, and all it needs now really is that sort of international widespread recognition that sort of Visa and MasterCard and other payment channels have, which I think will come. part of its legacy has been that it's been dogged by fraud, but that's really now kind of not a thing of the past because everything's always going to have a fraud and cyber attack element to it. But thanks to people like Avena, which I think is on now 1 billion handsets, use a little bit of Avena code to monitor sort of DCB transactions. But Avena have made DCB a sort of a mainstream service because it's relatively clean in that regard. And in the video that David Lofty sort of talks about how they did that and where it goes next. And of course, where it goes next is using AI to monitor what the cyber criminals are doing and counteracting it. And AI can spot those anomalous sort of bits of behavior, no matter how clever the criminals are. So it's it is everywhere. In the compliance world, we also talked to Xenia, as you say, from MCP. She was very interesting actually because we sort of talk about sort of the world of how compliance is going around DCB services, and largely it's going very well. Markets are increasingly compliant. There are a few that are less so, but even those are sort of I think the Saudi Arabian market has had some issues in the past. Even that's now starting to become more compliant and starting, as we'll come to become a much bigger opportunity. The UK market's hugely compliant and works really well, and again is fueling this sort of DCB as a mainstream payment channel. So it's all sort of coming together beautifully, driven by AI or underpinned by AI and enhanced by AI. But really, I think it's that we now have great content services, easy ways to bill for it, and a consumer base that's hungry for it, and they want content. They don't all want to pay and stream Netflix. They want all sorts of things, and it's all out there in that long tail of content. And that was the thing that really struck me at 8.1 Live, was the positivity as to how people are so positive about where this is currently going. It is a booming market, and how the sort of fraudulent side of it, which has often been a sort of dark cloud hovering on the horizon of telemedia, seems to be very much, in the background and not such of a problem anymore. It's been really well tackled. So yeah, I'm very positive all round on that front.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned Victoria Hull and the dynamic mobile billing, because she gave such a great summary of what we know are the selling points for DCB, but I think really pointed out where those growth areas were, and she was talking about niche markets, wasn't she? She was talking about esports. The other thing, of course, which was, I suppose, slightly frustrating, was that for the last 20 odd years, we've been talking about mobile operators getting behind, you know, a form of carrier billing. It wasn't carrier billing 20 years ago, but being able to sort of present a kind of unified brand to the consumer in order to give them the confidence in the same way as they would when they see the Visa or MasterCard sign. And she pointed out quite interestingly that we've seen some developments in that direction in Germany, I think.
Yeah.
And also she mentioned, other markets are doing better. For example, in Africa and Kenya, you're getting paid a lot quicker. So those are some couple of elements that, she pointed out, which I think are, remarkably still issues, but we are seeing some breakthroughs. But clearly, more operator involvement to help consumers understand and have confidence in DCB will really help. The other thing that on the AI side of things, which really sort of struck me, was that, and I said, again, it's sort of good news and bad news, because obviously you've got to balance this out with the fact fraudsters are using AI too. But when David said that, AI has been a game changer in terms of fraud detection, in that it's now 1,000 times more effective, that they can monitor 1,000 times more traffic and advertising and all that kind of stuff than they did before, which, because obviously in the old days it was fairly low tech in comparison to what AI can do. So I think that again, it was really good to see that everybody's really got on board with this, and that actually they're driving the industry forward using AI. And going back to Victoria's point, it sounds as though progress is being made, and I guess that the proof's in the pudding. But if people start to see the successes that a kind of coordinated response in Germany have on that market, then hopefully other countries and other operators will start to fall into line. And us as an industry body, if you like, will obviously continue to try and make events like World Telemedia a place where operators can start coming and getting face to face with the industry and start tackling,
Mm.
some of these maybe not even challenges, but taking on some of the opportunities if they can work out a more coordinated response, and that way we'll be able to sell even more content to even more people.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the content side of it's really interesting.
Let's talk about content.
Let's talk about content. It's yeah, because I don't know. We live in a world where we're bombarded with content, and I don't know. Most of the people watching this will probably settle down at some point this evening with a beverage of their choice and watch either Netflix, Prime, Hulu, or some major streaming service. However, they will have probably spent some of the time during the day, or their kids certainly will, watching all this vast array of other stuff that's out there.
Mm,
Um, and I think that's what struck me the most, talking to people like Seriously Fresh Media and Sam Media, and Media XO and Telecoming, and even like the companies that sort of facilitate kind of the network side of it or the billing side of it. The thing is about this sort of like huge market for content, niche content, this long tail of content, education stuff, which have long been banging on about. That's become really sort of big. How-to stuff, exercise stuff, health and well-being things. Sport, obviously, is massive.
mm,
Um, but not again, it's expensive to sit and watch, a Premier League match, but it's very inexpensive to get all the behind the scenes stuff and
mm,
the stats and all that kind of thing, which is proving increasingly popular.
mm,
So I think it's this long tail model of content. There's interesting models with how to create the content. I think AI is playing a role increasingly, certainly talking to Seriously Fresh Media about, they're very much exploring how AI can help enhance understanding what content is needed and then helping to create that content so they can do it quickly and agilely
mm.
for the market, because the market does keep moving and changing. So I think that we've seen a lot of that. But on the other side, like I say, sport content, huge. I think that's just keeps on growing. Probably doesn't need a huge amount of input from AI to create the content, but in understanding what content people want, the AI does,
Mm.
and they're all using it. It's no longer a thing that only big companies do. Everybody's on it, and that I felt was one of the really interesting things. We've now got a way of messaging about the content. We've got a way of billing for the content. We've got all this vast amount of content,
Mm.
and it's all really starting to come together. And the whole sort of atmosphere around this at the show was really positive.
Yeah, no, I agree. Although, as a sort of slight footnote to that, it was interesting to hear Vera Balak, the senior
Mm.
manager at Media XO, referencing the fact that that she sees this thing called content fatigue, which I
Fatigue, yeah.
suppose really is referencing the fact that there
You've got
needs,
to keep it. You've got to keep it coming and new and
yeah,
more and better
yeah.
and different. And yeah, that's where the AI comes into creating the content to get around the content fatigue. Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's right. I mean, if anyone's interested to, well, I would recommend. There are several, again, interviews that we have posted from 8.1 Live Barcelona. One of which is Vera, who talks about trends in MENA, and in fact, a lot of people talked about
Mm.
that as it's been kind of top of everyone's list as a territory now for the best part of a couple of years now, and it seems to be really kicking off. She said that she was referencing Saudi Arabia as being a particularly exciting market. And in fact, also going back to our friend Khalil, who's the managing partner at KNC Sal, who have once again agreed to sponsor World Telemedia in Marbella, which is 5, 6,
Oh.
7 of October, in case you didn't know. He also talked about MENA being, sort of top of his list of territories, but also pointed out that there are challenges in that market with regards to,
Mm.
keeping people loyal. He talked about loyalty programs for subscribers working very well. Obviously, continually being innovative with the content, and clearly, having some kind of anti-fraud and compliance issues underpinning all of those things. But MENA seemed to be a constant theme, I suppose,
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia in
in
particular within
particular.
that,
Yeah,
because it's a huge market, a massive population that
yeah.
has had some sort of some problems in the past with fraud, but is now much better regulated and has surged back and seems to be top of everyone's agenda.
Which brings us neatly to, and if I can find the page, I can't find the page, but 3A Net, one of our
Mm,
great supporters, also has Meet the
yeah,
People, and Ashraf is profiled in there. So I think
yeah.
he's definitely someone to get in touch with them, with regards to Saudi Arabia. And I know that he if you can get close to him during one of our events, you've done very well. So the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's in everyone, a target for everybody, but not without its challenges, unless you have good local support and a good understanding of local markets.
Mm,
Which I think is also, again, another common theme, not particularly new, but I saw an interview with Thomas Martins from Mobipium, another World Telemedia
yeah.
sponsor, who again makes that point that you've got to work with third-party specialists that can help you understand the individual intricacies and profile types of the markets that you're operating in, because the telemedia industry has always been cross-border, and content innovation and understanding your market is essential in order to what works right next door might not work in a neighboring territory. So again, I think telemedia have embraced that concept pretty well. And anybody that wants to market premium services into pretty much any corner of the globe will find an expert partner within the telemedia family. Which we don't use that term enough. I think we're a telemedia
Yeah,
family.
I think so. Yeah.
Now,
It's a
drilling
it's
down,
a it's a big family.
getting bigger. It's getting bigger. Now, just before we finish, I suppose the final video that interview that I saw really does highlight the opportunities in sport tech as
Mm,
being one of the best value-added services and DCB content conversions that we're likely to see this year, particularly because, of course, we've got another fantastic sporting summer ahead of us,
yeah.
not least the Olympics coming up in Paris in the summer. And whenever there's a big sporting event, in fact, I think the Euros is happening as well, if I'm not very much
It
mistaken,
is. Yeah. Yeah.
amongst other things. And over the years, we've seen these big events really as the catalyst for new services, for new successful value-added services, onboarding of all kinds of subscribers that are driven on by the passions that come around as soon as some big sporting event becomes the forefront of everyone's mind. And there's a nice interview with Gorkan Valicki, who's the business development manager at Telecoming. We were very pleased to have one of the leading players there, based in Spain, supporting and sponsoring 8.1 Live for the second year in a row. And he talked quite interestingly about sport tech as a content strategy. And I know that whenever I've seen them at various other events, particularly I'm thinking about the Telecom Middle East shows in Dubai.
Mm,
It seems as though those guys, Digital Virgo as well, for example, Cookies, really seem to be embracing Sport Locker. Really seem to be embracing sport as being, a driver for the VAS market, and I'm hoping that we're going to see a lot more of that kind of stuff over the next 12 months, particularly given
yeah.
it's going to be a busy old summer. So I don't know if you've got anything to add
Yeah,
about.
no, absolutely. I mean, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's a massive content type. It's very popular. I mean, sport's always been very popular. It lends itself to being sliced and diced for short form, medium form, long form content analysis. There's all sorts you can do with it, and we have once again a summer packed full of sport. And I think again, interestingly, coming back to the Middle East and North Africa, there's been a drive over the past of the decade, particularly in Middle Eastern countries, to grow sport. That's why the World Cup was held in Qatar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
uh, the other winter, not this winter, wasn't it? It was the one before. Um, Again, because it's sort of self-generating this sort of massive interest in that area for international sport and then local sport. And I think that's also going to contribute to MENA, the MENA region, becoming a big, big content player for now. So yeah, I think yes, sport absolutely.
Mm,
I can't see it. You know, people have never lost interest in sport. It's an ongoing thing. It's always going to underpin this.
mm.
What I'd say last of all is one of the things that stood out for me, and we did cover it in the World Telemedia Show in October, where they launched it, was Sam Media's Sing Space uh, kind of interactive virtual karaoke. There it is an excellent idea. I think this is a brilliant example of taking something that's it's old, isn't it? Karaoke. It's not a new thing, but combining it with sort of modern interactive technology, AI, and avatars, you've suddenly got a brilliant virtual world service that
Yeah,
you can see that a lot of people are going to get into.
yeah. I,
So
I feel like we
innovation is the
I
key.
feel like we should have a World Telemedia Sing Space competition.
I think we should.
I think we
I
should
think we
launch it
should.
right now.
I think we should. That's an excellent idea.
Okay, well,
We
more,
should.
we'll brainstorm. We'll brainstorm that when we're
Well, Dre, and in 2 weeks' time, when we do our next podcast, maybe we'll do it through the medium of karaoke.
looking forward to that. All right. So listen, Paul, thanks for your time. Sorry, I've been absent for the last.
No, no, no. Glad to have you back.
It's good
You've
to be
been
back,
missed.
everyone. Please do keep in touch with us if you've got any good news stories, or even bad news stories. You know, we need to know about them. So please get in touch with Paul and myself, and to ensure that we can keep the industry connected and informed using our various social media channels. Also, now, of course, is the time to keep the momentum going from 8.1 Live Barcelona. The World Telemedia floor plan is available on request. I think we're already about 35-40% sold out. So please hurry up.
Wow.
It's going to be another banging event in Marbella. 5, 6, 7 of October at the Hard Rock Hotel. And I think also just on the final point about content and good news stories, now's definitely the time to start talking to us about using those events as opportunities to have workshops, brainstorm ideas, showcase new technologies, and now is the time to get in touch with us to talk about getting involved with the conference, and workshops and meetings and all those kinds of things that really can't happen virtually. We know now that face to face is where it's at, and I think if you look at the telemedia news, and you look at, well, sorry, 8.1 Live and telemedia news, and you see the benefits of actually hearing views coming out of the mouths of the people that are making it happen.
Mm.
It's invaluable. So we want to continue to help people share their experiences, share their knowledge, and drive the industry forward. So, Paul, listen, mate, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I'm gonna disappear now. I have got a little bit of the old COVID still hanging in there, so I'm gonna just take the rest of the afternoon off. I think this has all been too much for me. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time, mate.
Indeed, you will. Take care of yourselves and goodbye, everybody.
See you, everyone. Bye bye.